Hey, welcome back. I have another After Effects tutorial for you guys. Today we are going to cover After Effects and its synergies with Adobe Premiere. So next week we'll kind of do something very similar with how After Effects can work with Photoshop, but this week it is Premiere for us. So if you are not familiar with Premiere, it is a non-linear editor, so it's like a video editor that comes with the Adobe Creative Cloud suite. So if you have your own Creative Cloud account, which you do, you can certainly download that and use it to edit some video and stuff. So After Effects does not edit video. I mean, you can sort of edit video, but Premiere is the thing for that. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Premiere real quick so you can see what's going on here. And maybe you don't necessarily need Adobe Premiere to complete the project today, but it wouldn't hurt anything. So I went ahead and launched Premiere, and I brought in some sample interview footage. I just pulled this off of YouTube. I clicked and dragged that into my timeline area here, so it all kind of conformed to the size and the frame rate of my video. So if I play that back, I have a little bit of interview footage here. Now, if I wanted to just take this out into After Effects, it's pretty easy for us to do. If I right-click any of my clips here and go to Replace with After Effects Composition, if I click that, it's going to launch After Effects if After Effects isn't already launched. And then it's going to create a new project for me. I would have to name it, so I can call this Interview. And I would need to save it in a specific place. Press save there, and it will launch After Effects for me. I can just close out of that panel, and now I can see, hey, here is my interview footage, and it is trimmed up to be the exact same length that it was before. So if the idea is you have a clip and you need to do some extra stuff outside of Premiere, if you need to add more effects than what Premiere has in it, if you want to do rotoscoping in After Effects rather than Premiere because it's a lot easier for you, and like the interface is kind of made for that, you certainly can do it that easily. I'm just going to press Control-Z and get rid of that stuff real quick though. And if I go back to Premiere, I'm going to press Control-Z here as well to get myself back to this original footage. So that's not really what I wanted to show you guys inside Premiere and After Effects. Instead, what I want to show you is the essential graphics area. So if I head on over to Window, Workspaces, and Graphics, I can see I have a bunch of graphic templates over here, and they might not be the same for you as they are for me since I've downloaded a bunch from outside sources, but if I grab any of these things, click, drag, and drop them, they'll act just like a video, but they're like a customized, they're customizable text and maybe customizable graphics as well. You can maybe adjust these lines here. So to work in Essential Graphics, it's really simple to do. You can click on any of the items that exist here. So there's a line, there's the text, and then there's another line afterwards. Now, if I wanted to change what that says, I could just grab this text tool here. I could highlight what it says, and I can say, new title. Okay, and it's really it makes things really easy for like slightly more complex shapes and animations. Like this might animate in, sure it does. So it kind of zooms in and bounces back, and then probably does the same thing to get out. And we can change the text to be whatever we want. Now, there are a bunch of these things already inside Premiere. You can find a plethora of lower thirds. And if we jump over to the Adobe stock area here, we can maybe toggle on the free option so you don't have to pay for anything. But they have a bunch of templates here that are a little bit more complex. We can jump pages here and find some things that we like. We can also kind of hover left and right and kind of scrub through these things to see what the animation would actually look like. There it goes. then it's all customizable. So you can maybe take out some of the animations or change some of the text or change some of the text color. But what you can customize all depends on what the creator intended you to be able to customize. So if we wanted to create our own from scratch, they might not be quite as complex as this, but I think that we can do it just fine. So let's go ahead and close out of this thing. Let's hop on over to After Effects finally, and let's create a brand new composition. We will make this 1920 by 1080 and 23.976 frames per second, since that is generally what a lot of people export their video in. You can make your background color whatever you'd like, but I'm just going to choose black for mine. And maybe we'll make this 10 seconds long, and then we can always trim down our composition when we figure out what kind of animation we have. And since we're working with this interview footage, I think it might be a good idea to do some kind of lower third. So we are going to set ourselves up for success and click this little button down here for grid and guide options, and we're going to turn on title and action safe, so then we can see our title safe, which is the inner rectangle, the inner 16 by 9 rectangle, and the outer 16 by 9 rectangle is action safe. So if you have your text within this rectangle that I'm kind of going over with my mouse here, then you know that you're pretty well safe for any kind of display that your video goes out to. So if you're only going out to YouTube and you know people are just going to be looking at it on their phone and stuff, you can maybe go outside the title safe area. But if you don't know if people are going to watch it on their televisions or on their laptops, sometimes things can get cut off, and you definitely don't want your text to be cut off. So this is a good area to put your text within. So if your text is within that, you're relatively safe that your stuff isn't going to get cut off there. Okay, so to start this thing off, we want to make some text. We want to make our lower third completed, and then we'll animate it away, and then we'll reverse that animation to make it show up. So I'm just going to use my text tool here. I'm going to do a name. So I'm not putting a generic name. I do want to make it somewhat long though. Better to go too long than too short, because we are making this kind of customizable. And if someone has a really long name, you don't want it to like roll over into a second line or anything like that. Okay, I just duplicated my text here and then held in Shift and pulled it downward so everything continues to be lined up there. Okay, I made this a longer line as well. Both of these are centered text and stuff, so they should stay in a relative position. Okay, now I'm just going to use my pen tool. I'm going to make a new shape here, and it's just going to be a solid line, and I don't need a fill. So I'm going to alt-click that a couple of times till I get no fill, and then I'm going to add a stroke, and it's going to be white. I'll turn that up until that looks okay. Now at this point, I could maybe change the butt end to like a curved end. I can adjust this however I need. I could make it a curved line, potentially whatever you want there to kind of customize it. So I'll just go with the rounded cap there. Okay, so this is a very, very basic looking lower third. It does the job. It's got their name, it's got their profession or position, and it's long enough where you should be able to type in most names or most positions without it rolling over into like a second line of text. which would totally mess this stuff up. So now we're going to do a little bit of animation with this stuff. We want our names to come in kind of specific way, and we want our line to come in a specific way. And you can animate this stuff however you'd like. So let's customize it. Let's have some interesting lower thirds here. I'm going to have my line draw itself out, and then I'm going to have my text masked coming up from the line and down from the line. So to do this, I'm just going to shy out both my text layers, and then I'm going to work with my shape layer first. I'm just going to rename that really quickly to line so I don't get confused by things. Then I'm going to find a good place for the line to be completely drawn out. Now this should not take like a full second or anything like that, so I'm just going to go with, it'll finish at about 6 frames in. And then I can kind of adjust things from there. So I'm going to start with, I'm just going to use scale. Okay, and at 6 frames, it is at 100% scale, and at 0 frames, it's going to be at 0% scale, but just in one direction. So I'm going to ungang my scale proportions, and I'm just going to use my my X to go to 0. Okay, that works. And now over the course of this, it's going to stretch itself out. But it's stretching from a weird position because of that anchor point. So let's go ahead and mess with our anchor point. Put that in the right place. So now it'll scale from the anchor point position. So now that's what happens. And that looks okay. It looks like maybe six frames is the right way to go, but I definitely want to add, say, some eases. Okay, and it's a little bit choppy in its playback, but I have a feeling that it does kind of ease in. And then I might want to add something like motion blur. And that's going to help a little bit too. All right, looks good there. Now I just want to do the opposite of this for when it goes away. But before then, let's go ahead and get our text and stuff done. It'll be pretty easy for us just to copy these keyframes and paste them. So I'm going to go to first name, last name first. And we're going to wait until that line is mostly made before we start this animation here. So this whole animation is going to be done with position keyframes and masks. So eventually I want this text to be right here, but that should be a few frames after the line has completed. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle on keyframes there. I'm going to move my playhead back to where the text is going to start moving to that position. And then I'm going to adjust my position. So that would be the Y position, and we just want it underneath our line here. Okay, so here's what happens. Great. That is what we're looking for. We'll add some eases here. Okay, and then all we're going to do here, all we're going to do now is add a mask so that we can't see our text when it's under that line. So to add a mask, I'm sure you guys remember, but we just used the pen tool here. We could also use this rectangle tool. Maybe we'll use the rectangle tool since we don't use that often. Just make sure that you have your layer that you want to mask selected, and then draw a mask over the text. So right now it's going to do the inverse of what we want. We have this rectangle here, and anything within the rectangle we can actually see. Also, the rectangle is going to be moving with the text since the position applies to the entirety of the layer and not just the text itself. So it's also moving the mask with us. So first thing first, we need to change what the mask is doing. So it's not adding, it's actually subtracting. So we don't see what's inside the mask, which is great. And then after that, we're going to have to adjust the mask position. So if we twirl down on mask, we can go to mask path, turn on keyframes for that. And then we just make sure that over the course of this animation, we just find where that animation ends, which is right there, that our box here stays in place. So we're just going to move that down, make sure it stays on that line the whole way. And it kind of moves a little bit funky instead of staying right with the text, but that's because of those eases. So we'll just add eases here as well, so it'll kind of match what our text is doing. Okay. So now we have this text that comes, or the line that comes in, and then our text flies in right underneath it. And we can stretch that out maybe just a little bit so we can see that animation. If I want to see both my keyframes for my mask and my keyframes for my text, if I just press U on my layer, I'll see all keyframes for that layer, so I can grab both and stretch those out a little bit. That's a little bit better. Great. So now we're going to do the same exact thing for our profession or position line here. Once again, position on that layer, and we're going to do the inverse of what we did before. So we need to turn on the eye there. And if we want it to match what we have in the other layer, we can just keep those keyframes turned on. I can turn on I can toggle on my keyframes for position on the profession layer. That's going to get confusing real quick. So keyframes are turned on here, and it is where it needs to be. I can head on over to the other keyframe for the other text there, and then adjust the Y position so that it's above that line. And then over the course of the animation here, it's going to come down and do exactly what I want, but we still need to create that that mask. So we'll just use that rectangle tool again. We'll do the same thing right around the text. We'll change that from add to subtract. And then we will twirl down on mask properties and go toggle on mask path. Press U on my keyboard to get both sets of keyframes pulled up. I can jump on over to the next keyframe for position, add another keyframe there, and just kind of move that back to the other side of the line. Okay, we want to add eases on both of these keyframes. Ease out from a stop and ease into a stop. All right, now we can play that back and see how we did. All right, not too bad. So from here, we can kind of customize even further. If I don't like both bits of text coming out at the same time, and maybe I don't like that much. So maybe I'll take the profession and position, since I want people to read that first name first, and then position or profession second. So I'll kind of offset those two things a little bit. So I'll let the first name, last name come in. Just scrub through here to see how that's going to go. And then the other one comes in. It starts a little bit before the other one completely finishes, but that's much better. So at this point, we do need our text and our line to leave the screen, and we have a bunch of options for that. We could copy and paste these keyframes and invert them so that they leave the same way they came in, or we could take this opportunity to do a slightly different way to get our text and our line to go away. And maybe what we can use is some opacity controls and something else. So let's use opacity to get rid of our text. If I click on my text layer, I can press T for transparency or opacity, and then I can toggle on keyframes after a certain point. So like, let's see how long it takes to read it. All right, right around the 2-second mark seems to be a good time for me. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle on keyframes so it stays at 100% opacity up until right around 2 seconds, or a little after 2 seconds here, 2 seconds, 1 frame. And then, over the course of 11 more frames, we'll make it go to 0. So let's see how quickly that fades out. Maybe not quickly enough. It doesn't need to be a long animation here, so I'm going to kind of cut that in half and actually leave my text up a little bit longer. Cool. Fades out kind of quickly. I don't think we need eases here, but you can certainly add eases even to opacity controls. We're going to do the same thing with the profession thing, and this time we are going to make them fade out at the same exact time. All right, great. So those two things are out of there. And then maybe we can just kind of reverse the line itself to go back the way it came. So to do that, I'm just going to select the keyframes for scale here. I'm going to copy them with Control C. I'm going to move my playhead over to a good place to have it move back, and I'm going to press Control V. And there they are, but they're going to do the opposite of what I want them to do. They're going to grow back out just like they did the first time. So I'm just going to zoom in here. Maybe I'm going to adjust the length of it too so that it is gone at the same time as my text disappears. But what I want to do is invert these two keyframes. So I'm just grabbing the one and moving it to the other side. So that means that it, let's take a look at what happens with the values real quick. So it starts at 0, comes out to 100. You can see the values for scale right there. And then it sits at 100 the entire time until it reaches this keyframe, and then it goes back to 0. And then the entire rest of this composition, it's at 0. So let's just play that back and see what it looks like. Not too bad. Maybe I can make that line move a little bit earlier than the text disappearing. Okay, that's a little bit better. Now I do want to change these two eases since we're going in the opposite direction here. I can go to ease out at this point, but you see that once I do that, it has both the ease in and ease out on top of it, and that is a little bit of trouble there. It doesn't seem super intuitive, but if you hold in Control and click your keyframe, that'll turn it back into a regular keyframe, and then you can add your ease out, and then it's a regular ease out. We can change this one to an ease in. Great. All right, so at this point, I really like my animation. So here is my lower third, pops up and it goes away. And actually, I'm going to add motion blur on both of my names as well, since those kind of come in quickly, just to make them match my line. And you can't really see it in full speed, but it is there. You can see it if I'm on those frames there. I can see some motion blur on my text. It really does make a difference, a strong positive difference. Okay, so from here, I want to turn this into an Essential Graphics template. But before I do that, I want to shorten this thing up. And in the past, we have always just grabbed our work area bar and turn that down, because that does work when we export our stuff as a video format, but it's not going to work for the Essential Graphics tab. So instead, we actually have to trim up our composition. So this thing ends at what, 2 minutes and 15 or 2 seconds and 15 frames. So if I go up to my composition here and go to composition settings, I can change that from 10 seconds to 2 seconds and 15 frames. And then I'll press OK. And now it's just as long as it needs to be for my lower third. All right, looks pretty good there. Next thing, I'm going to actually have to turn it into a Essential Graphics template. And to do that, if I go up to Window here, I can find a window for Essential Graphics and click it. And now we have the Essential Graphics tab opened in After Effects. So right now it's doing a whole lot of nothing. We can save this thing as an Essential Graphics template as soon as we add a composition here. So if we click on Master, we can click Comp 1, since that's what our composition is called. Now, if we exported this thing, it would be not customizable at all. So if we exported this thing, it would be a MoGraph template, but we wouldn't even be able to change the first name and last name here. It would just, like if you dragged and dropped that in Premiere, it would just say first name, last name, profession, or position, with no options to customize any elements here. So what we want to be able to customize, we actually need to drag and drop into the Essential Graphics area here. And it's pretty much any value that you can change. So we want to be able to change out what this stuff says. So let's go ahead and twirl down on first name, last name, and then text, and then source text. So the source text is what text is inside this text box. Now, if I click and drag and drop that here, now we can change out what says first name, last name to be whatever we want. So if I wanted that to be my name, that would change that out, and that's what it would look like if I changed it out to my name. Okay, maybe we'll change this thing saying source text to say name. That way, if we uploaded this for somebody who hasn't worked with it or didn't create it in After Effects, they would understand what was going on and they could customize it however they wanted to. So that one works for me. So let's go ahead and drag and drop the second one in here. We're going to twirl down on text. We're going to grab source text and drag and drop that in there. And then we can maybe change this one to position or profession, whatever you think people use more. And then we could just try this out real quick. So all right. So that looks pretty good too. Everything stayed centered and stuff, and it stayed where we wanted it to be. Okay, so maybe we want to adjust some more things. There's a ton of things that we can adjust in the Essential Graphics or make it so that they are adjustable and customizable. Let's go ahead and experiment with some of those things here. If we twirl down on line, and then I twirl down on content and shape, I should find things for stroke. So that's what we have here is a stroke, and we can have a stroke color. We can click and drag that. We can name this maybe line color. And now it should be adjustable to be whatever color you want. So if you want your line to turn red, we can turn it red. We can turn it any color that you potentially want. You can do the same with your text. You can do the same with maybe adjust the line cap here, and you have the option to change that stuff if you want to. Maybe line cap makes sense just to keep it called that. But pretty much anything that you want that isn't already keyframed is certainly something that you can adjust. So anything in our layer panel, you twirl down and you find anything that has adjustable properties. We can click, drag, and drop in here. And we can make this as dense as we want. So we can also add comments if we need comments. If we click this little drop down here, we can click add comment. And maybe we can add something like template is for 1080p footage. Which is a common thing with me. Like if I create a template for 4K footage and stuff, I'll drag it into a 1080p timeline, and then it'll look weird, and I don't know what's exactly going on there. So maybe that comment could really help me out. You can also add groups. So you can maybe take both of these text guys and throw those into that group, and we can call this group titles. And then we can add another group, and we'll call that line properties. And we can click and drag those things in there too. All right. Oh, and maybe this one stays outside of that. All right, perfect. So we've created our template. It plays back really well. It's a nice little animation, and we can name this thing something. So maybe we call it lower third, and maybe I'll add that it's Brandon. So that's the font that I used there. So I wouldn't get confused about which lower third it actually is. And we already set this stuff, so we can click set poster time, and then that will, depending on where your playhead is, let me just autosave real quick, maybe, hopefully it doesn't freeze on me, there it goes. Depending on where your playhead is, if I click that set poster time now, I would just have that black screen, and if I'm looking through my my motion graphics templates in Essential Graphics and I see that it's just a black screen, I might not know what is going on there, but we can create that poster time there so we can see what the final result will actually look like. So when we're happy with this whole thing, we'll click Export Motion Graphics Template, and it will prompt you to save real quick. So we can go ahead and save that. Now you have a few options here for local templates folder or local drive. So local drive just means your hard drive, wherever you choose to save things, you get an option where are you going to save it. So I'm going to go ahead and use that real quick. I'm going to put it on the desktop. So I can find it really quickly. But you could click local templates folder, which is kind of deep into the folder structure of Adobe. So it will like automatically be inside Premiere for you. You can find it really easily. That said, you can't share it with other people quite as easily. You'd have to find it in there. So you'd have to like do a search for a .mogrt to be able to find it, and then to maybe email it to somebody. So I'm just going to put it on my local drive, and then I'm going to put it on the desktop where I have it here. That way I can save it and put it up, say, on Canvas if I was going to do that, where you guys could access it and use it. Now, this compatibility thing here, warn me if it uses fonts that aren't available from Adobe Fonts. That's really important. So I created this with Brandon Grotesque font, which is one of my favorite fonts, but it's like one that I downloaded specifically, and maybe it's not on Adobe Typekit. So there can be like this little warning that pops up that says, hey, this template was made using a font that you don't have on your computer, and it's also not available on Adobe Typekit. We're just going to use whatever you have on your computer. So that's really important to have selected on, just in case you do have some kind of issue with that stuff. The other one says, warn me if Adobe After Effects needs to be installed in order to customize this motion graphics template. That's important too. So if you created this thing using like 3D workspace, then whoever is accessing this on Premiere would need to have After Effects installed for it to work on their computer. So it's important for us to know if you're going to need that to make your template work. So keep that selected on as well. And then there's one more here that says, warn me if there are text controls that cannot be edited with the Premiere Pro type tool. So again, if there's going to be some kind of issue here with the type tool in Premiere, it's not going to let you change out the text for some reason. It will give you a warning for that as well. So we're going to go ahead and press OK. And then if we have any issues, it's going to give us those warnings and tell us that something's wrong. So that is almost it. So I'm going to head on over to Adobe Premiere now and import this thing into Essential Graphics. So if I head on over to Adobe, I'm here already and I have my Essential Graphics tab opened. Now if I head on over to the Browse area and then My Templates, I won't see this right off the bat because I didn't save my Motion Graphics template in my Templates folder. Instead, I saved it on the desktop. So if you have downloaded a third-party template, or maybe your friend created a really cool motion graphics lower third and shared it with you, you can always click this little button here that says Install Motion Graphics Template, and then you have to go find where you saved it. In my case, I saved it on the desktop. Then I can double click that and it will import. So it imports into that, into your library folder. So the local templates folder here, or libraries, it should be saved in your local templates folder now. So now if I just search up here for lower third, I might find a few things, but hopefully I'll find mine as well. Lower third, here's a couple of things, and here it is, lower third Brandon, the one that I created. I can click, drag, and drop that now. Almost. Click, drag, and drop it now, and there it is. So this guy is not me, but if he was, this lower third would make a whole lot of sense, right? So there's my lower third, and now I have the option to customize it and stuff. So if I'm in the Essential Graphics under the edit here, we see that comment that I created that says template is for 1080p footage, and this is 1080p footage, so we know that it's all formatted correctly for us. We can twirl down on titles, and I can change this name out to be someone, I don't know this guy's name, but we're just going to guess. Sure, Bill Sanderson. That sounds like, he looks like a Bill to me. All right, and then who he is or what he is. Let's go ahead and say he's a filmmaker. And now our animation still works like that, and it comes out how we want it to, and it has our own customized stuff. Now if I wanted to maybe change the line color to be something else, maybe we could find something in the actual footage. There we go. Now now we have a line that kind of uses some of the pixels in the actual footage. So we can kind of customize that how we need to. Now, before we're finished with this thing, I want to show you something else in After Effects that I think can help us out. So if I sort of shrink that up, here's what's going to happen. Yikes, right? It has to be the exact length that I want it to be here, it has to be the exact length that I created in After Effects for the animation to work properly. So there are some workarounds. You could, potentially use a razor tool and chop some pieces out of the middle and clean that up. But why would you want to do that every single time? Wouldn't it be so much more convenient if you could just grab that handle and shrink it down in terms of its length? So I want to show you this extra thing in After Effects that we don't know yet. We basically worked with all stuff that we already knew in After Effects before. But we can use markers in here. You might be familiar with markers from Premiere if you're familiar with Premiere at all. But there are these little markers here. If I hover over it, it says comp marker bin, drag to the left, to get a new marker. So I can click and drag this marker in here, and then I can double click it. This can work for just for notes in your After Effects composition. So if you wanted to say like, oh, this is my in point, my out point, if I'm doing like an animation and it doesn't take up the entirety of the clip, I can certainly do that. I can also just get rid of these things, click and drag them off the screen here. But you might notice there's this extra little thing that isn't in Premiere at all, besides, comments here. You can always add a comment, and you can change the duration here as well. But this responsive design time, you can create protected regions of your clips or your layers. So you can protect areas of animation so that if you retime things, that those areas of animation won't change in the retiming process. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that really quickly. Let's just do it for the entirety of our composition here. So we're going to create one that lasts from here to here. Right, so now our animation has ended. So that's at 18 frames. So let's go ahead and double click that and change the duration to 18 frames. And we can call this intro. And we will turn it into a protected region. Okay, great. So there's our intro. And then we can check out our outro. So our outro starts right here. So let's go ahead and put another one. And it goes from 2 seconds and 3 frames to 2 seconds and 14 frames. So what is that, 11 frames? Just change this duration to 11 frames. We'll call that outro. We'll make sure that we have, again, this protected region here selected on. Now we could change the label so that we can tell that there's a difference between intro and outro. Right now our intro is that kind of blue color, so maybe we can make our outro sea foam. Sure, we'll go ahead and press OK there. So it'll be a little bit of a different color. So our marker area here doesn't look like it's taken up everything. It looks really close though. Just to be safe, I'm going to drag that outward. We can do the same with anything else. If that math wasn't easy for you, like with the duration, so long as you turn up the duration past a couple of frames, you can just grab the handles here and adjust them. You can adjust where they exist and stuff, and you can adjust the length. So if I want it to be longer, I can grab the handle and turn that out longer. If I want to move where it is, I can click and move it from the first handle. Okay, now just to test this thing inside After Effects, since our composition is what has those protected areas in it, we can go ahead and make a new composition out of that composition. So we're basically taking comp 1 and turning it into a pre-comp. We just click and drag that composition 1 composition into the new composition button, just as you would any kind of new footage or any kind of asset that you have in the project window. So now we can see comp 1 is in there, and we can see those markers that we've created. Now, if we want to retime this at all, we're going to open up this one extra little area. So like if we go down into the bottom left, we already know things about the layer switches pane. We know about the transfer controls pane. And now we're going to expand the in-out duration stretch panes. So go ahead and click that. We have a little bit of extra stuff in here. Now stretch will adjust the timing of this stuff. So if we want our composition to be quicker, you can see now that the intro and outro times are not changing. So it's just stretching or contracting the areas in between. So we'll see, even though our animation even though our animation as a whole goes a lot quicker, like our text is only going to be up there for a fraction of a second before it leaves, the duration of the actual animation is or the duration of the two animation points, the intro and the outro, stays the same. Okay, now I can go the opposite way too. I can stretch things out, but as I do, I have gone beyond the bounds of the composition. So I'll have to go up into composition settings here. Let's just turn that back to a little over 10 seconds. And now you'll see the intro stays the same. And then it just stays up there, but then the outro stays the same again. So if we want to compare that to what our composition would look like otherwise, I'm just going to remove these two things so you can see what that would look like. So it's gone and it's gone again. Now if I jump back to that other composition and I click and drag that alternate version that doesn't have the protected areas on it, let's just go ahead and shy out the version that we fixed up. So that still looks the same, but as soon as I start stretching this out, you're going to see that that animation time takes a much longer time to happen, right? So that is responsive design in a nutshell, and also the essential graphics tab. So let's go ahead and once again export this thing and see how that responsive design works with Premiere. So if we have those two protected areas here, and then we export motion graphics template, we're going to go ahead and save it. And then we're going to put it on the local drive in the same exact place. And we are going to overwrite it. Now, going back to Premiere, I'm going to need to re-import that. So back under Browse, we're going to go ahead and bring this back in. And we are going to overwrite it once again. And here it is, lower third, Brandon. If I click and drag that in there, it looks exactly the same as before, except if I drag this outward, its animation is going to not get cut off, right? It's going to disappear when it needs to. And if I need to shorten that up, those areas of protection are retained inside the motion graphics template. All right, so that's how we would create some lower thirds, which I do think would be really helpful. So as you've worked through this thing with me, you may have made some slightly different choices with your lower thirds. Make sure you save those things and save them in a way that you can maybe move them computer to computer, so on your local drive, and then install them inside Premiere. What you are going to do is you're going to create your own motion graphics template for a main title. So you're going to animate using all of the things that you've already learned about titles and text inside After Effects. You'll create your own custom motion graphics template, and then you will upload that motion graphics template into Canvas. So upload your motion graphics template, your .mogrt, to Canvas, and also export a video of your motion graphics template so we can see what it looks like in action. All right, that's it for this week. I will see you all next week with some synergies between After Effects and Photoshop. It should be a whole lot of fun.